game 2 of Clan Mana and get into this, where I just waited thinking that this would start while Clan Mana game 2 was going on. It's actually kind of annoying. Alright, so second semifinal is here, and in the bottom left of Alcyone, it is MaxPax. In the top right, we have Reynor. So Reynor just demolished Showtime. The first game wasn't a demolishing, but the second game really was. Very unfortunate. He looks good in the matchup, but then Showtime's aggression wasn't particularly effective, I guess. Maybe not as effective as MaxPax's could be, is mostly what I'm getting at, because Showtime did a decent amount of damage with his oracles, but then lost one. Then he also lost 4 depths, who I don't think actually did anything. Maybe MaxPax doesn't do that. And that's kind of what we expect, actually, is that MaxPax wouldn't do that or get more from the sacrifice, as he is the leading Protoss of the European region when it comes to online tournaments. He might be leading Protoss in general if he actually went to offline, but we'll never know. We will never know. But yeah, that type of disruption that MaxPax seems capable of, the type that gets a couple of drones here, there, over there, under there, over here, and then also keeps some of the units alive, it's very obnoxious. And really does throw off those big swells of roach attacks that Reynor was doing. He was just a couple of seconds later to shoving into Showtime's 4th base. Showtime might have helped in that first game. And if he had lost 7 extra drones, maybe he would have been that much later. But we'll see what happens. MaxPax also a little more likely to do something more unorthodox than just the triple nexus into Stargate. Not too much so. He's not really so much a weird player as he does have his own way of doing things, and then he's pretty consistent about doing it. Just because he has the weirder styles of play in some of the matchups doesn't mean that he is overall a weird player, right? Like there's Haas, who's very odd and who does a lot of wacky things, and you're like, I'm not sure that makes sense. Hero even can do really wacky things, and you're like, I'm not sure if that makes sense. MaxPax mostly restricts himself to, you know, let's say like 6 builds. Just, you know, just an okay amount. But he does them really, really, really well. And maybe one of them is different than others. I would say not so much a PvZ, though, right? PvP, obviously, he's the only one where it's really low ground expanding all the time. PvT, he's a much bigger fan of the early Zealots or the Proxy Gates or anything like that. PvZ, I'm actually not sure he does something that is obviously very off-kilter. I think some of his little minute timings that you hear the pro gamers talk about will be a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit more scary, but it's not like a huge fork in the road. You know, one path is regular Protoss, other path is 2 base Tempest or something, you know. MaxPax doesn't do that. The 2 adepts are trying to find some damage. One adept will get injured but survive. And the other adept, without its buddy, couldn't one-shot the drone, so did not get the kill. And so far, it is pretty freaking normal. Oracle coming out now, 3rd Nexus does get slapped down, and Reynor is just trying to not take any damage. They got a little combination of units at this point. The Queens can take care of these 3 units. But the problem is constantly being in the right position. Actually, a little bit of a problem for MaxPax there, as Oracle had left the Adepts a little lonely. But the Adepts live. The Oracle kills all the Lings that were trying to kill the damn Adepts, and this is already a little more obnoxious than you would expect from a lot of other Protoss players, especially as this recall is also successful. These are all little tiny things that make Reynor kind of grit his teeth, because he definitely should have killed the Adepts. He should have gotten at least 1 kill in the Adept with the Queen. He shouldn't have taken the drone damage. He should have not had to rebuild 9 Lings. You know, whatever it is. It kind of feels frustrating even watching it. These Adepts, how are you guys still alive? Twilight Council and Forge now on the way. One of the more typical openers you can see, probably into that Blink and a little bit of aggression in the middle of the map as well. Actually coming in from the Adepts first. I was thinking about the Stalkers later on, but the Adepts, especially because they've all lived thus far, getting into a total number of 6 with 3 Oracles. You combine that together, and even Queen Ling needs to take that seriously, needs to have an appropriate number in response to it. Can't just depend on one or the other to take care of it. Only Lings or only Queens. So as you can see here, the combination is important, but still not quite going to be enough. The Adepts are barely going to win out there. A couple of the frontline ones do finally go down. And 3 Adepts will get into the natural line, but it actually was not the effective attack that MaxPax was hoping for. 25 Lings in total killed here, but really I would say for the second Adept problem, they were very efficient. It was mostly the first Adepts that got really efficient, and then it was certainly more of a trade afterward. We're really looking at the finer details of this game, because both of them are still macroing like beasts. Third base is done. Gases are up for MaxPax. He did go into Blink and +1, of course. More gateways are on the way, so not just diving headfirst into a 4th Nexus, which would be insanely fast, or into the Colossus. Might eventually get into him, though, as the Robo is done. War Prism's going to come out, and we do have that Stalker aggression definitely on the forefront of MaxPax's mind. So, total of 8 gateways. War Prism, Creep Spread, really not all that far out, because the Queens have had been so active. They have not had the easy job of 1 or 2 in the mineral lines of the Spore Crawler dissuading any damage from happening. By the way, Spore Crawler a bit late, so this Oracle came in, grabs 4 drones. So obnoxious, my goodness. They've had to been controlled on the front lines a little bit distracted. They've had to been pulled to kill the Adepts that do end up in the main base or the natural or the third base, and I think that actually has taken away maybe a couple of creep tumors from the front. So not yet over to that halfway point on Alcyone, which is a large map, so halfway is a little bit tougher, I suppose. But I wouldn't be surprised if other games Reynor has absolutely gotten there. Instead, we have the Stalker presence on the outskirts of Creep, almost capable of hitting the gold base, which is a little disappointing. They're able to kind of safely stay off of Creep while being a threat to that base. First got to kill the rocks, of course. Observer with the army, revelations as well if necessary. Creep tumors will not last very long, but these Lings went somewhere, and it looks like MaxPax was well aware that they could go for a run-by. They could also come back home and help out, but not so much anymore. The rocks are broken down. No cancel on that hatchery. And the Lings come in at this point, if they even could have come in, there's actually no way they can get past. They would have been filtered through in a line, in a conga line, in a choke, and it would have been less than ideal. Good spot on that stasis trap, gets popped pretty quickly. War Prism doesn't want to stick around with 4 Ravagers looking to Corrosive Violet. So a very nice response here from MaxPax, who was just all over this army movement. The other gold rocks are broken down, allowing a little bit more room for maneuverability from both sides. It's just that Reynor has yet to actually find a decent situation in which to use his mobility. He's constantly being cut off. Not quite getting the run-bys, not quite getting the surrounds, not quite getting the surprise. I got a bunch of army, MaxPax is controlling this like a pro. 4th base is on the way as well. A little protected too with a couple of Stalkers. And Reynor, not really looking to engage, to be fair, but definitely not finding the opportunity to do so. Behind this, he is grabbing a Hive, which actually is already done. Ultralisk Cavern is on the way. More upgrades as well. I mean, Reynor is doing some pretty damn good macro himself. Stasis traps aplenty coming down, and Stalkers on the front lines, making sure they don't get popped in air. Even on the backside, Ling's not able to get that surround like I've been talking about. Finally, one Stasis trap gets popped, but there are more where that's coming from. 3 Oracles still alive, and just a lot of movement around this particular section of the map. A lot of counter micro trying to come into play. And it seems like no one's really going to budge from this position. MaxPax the first to really evacuate. Reynor will continue to spread creep, now down over halfway across the map, which actually is pretty impressive. But there's that stasis trap finally being very effective. That is a lot of Lings taken out of the equation, and a faux force field also kind of helping out there, so MaxPax try to take advantage. However, we do finally have Reynor going for some run-bys. Banelings slow. Entering into the third base, kill 6 probes, not too bad, I guess, but all Banelings did die. Overseer finally being pushed away from the main base, which it is just seeing that confirmation that, hey, it's more round army, it's more ground army, and eventually it is Storm as well. No surprises there. Basically, I would say the surprise would be if there were Tempests on the way, right? Tempests or Fleet Beacon. There we go. Fleet Beacon are on the way. English is hard. Or if there was already a really good number of Immortals, then maybe that would have told Reynor not to go into Ultras. However, the Immortals have only just recently started up, although already in the count of 2 is better than a lot of other Protosses who would still be so hyper-focused on not dying or trying to be aggressive that they might have missed the fact that Reynor does in fact have a hive with Ultras on the way, something that MaxPax hasn't scouted, but probably just feels in the game. Reynor hasn't tried to just bowl him over with repeated attacks, so clearly he's not focusing all in on the lair game, and so the pauses that have been happening, the equal back and forth in the middle of the map, there's probably a hive built in there. He's absolutely right about that. Big Baneling run-by is going to conquer that adept at the front of the wall, the shield battery, the pylon, and the probes in the natural, as well as an immortal, forcing the recall. That was just such a big run-by, and MaxPax was not quite prepared for it. He was well aware there'd be another attack on the front lines. Unfortunately, despite his awareness, not able to save that Nexus. That was a kill, not a cancel. A little bit of revenge for the earlier game. And Reynor's gold base, actually. Finally, the Lings are cleaned up by the looks of things, but this wall has to be rebuilt. It is a very vulnerable area with very little detection as far as future run-bys. And MaxPax has got to continue prepping a very anti-Ling Ultra army. A couple of Ultras showed themselves. 1 or 2 of them died, I believe. Oh, no. I thought 1 or 2 had, because I just assumed more had been made. But no, it was only 1 Ultra. Now 7 are popping at the same time. Okay, fair enough. And so very much so still an Ultra-based army. But Greater Spire on the way as well. Reynor opening up the possibilities the longer this game goes. MaxPax finally maxed out himself with his own +3 attack as well. And still 4 bases. I mean, his economy isn't terrible, but he definitely is needing that 5th to come down at some point. He is going to try and be aggressive. The Ultras are ready, the Vipers are ready, and does MaxPax have enough to stop this from overwhelming him? Storms also available, as well as feedbacks. Now, Storms don't really do a whole lot to the Ultras, but anything counts, I suppose. A lot of the times they just wash off the Lings that are looking for more of a surround. A very Ling-light composition. Reynor remaxed almost entirely on Ultras after using his Lings and Banelings to crash through that natural, which still has not been rebuilt, by the way. No wall. And that could be a problem in the future, but right now Reynor is all about the big army units back at home defending. Not so much based around those Lings. They do have adrenal glands, they do have +3. A run-by would be absolutely devastating, and I am super worried for it. But Reynor doesn't have the Ling count, and is maybe a little more worried about just defending this gold base. It seems like he's got a lock on the high ground, but you gotta be careful not to let these Ultras derp forward, and then one of them gets sniped. Suddenly you're down to 4 Ultras, not 7. You know, it can happen very, very quickly. And it's actually MaxPax is gonna go for the first run-by in a little while. Unfortunately, very ineffective. The Lings that Reynor did create, helping out the Spine Crawlers that were there, and a good defense of that base. MaxPax still kind of fruitlessly trying to enter up this ramp, is now dividing his army in an attempt to really distract and out-multitask Reynor, but it's not working so far. Reynor now feeling confident enough to finally once again send the Lings across the map. These are again cracklings, so a cannon, even a couple of cannons, will not be enough. Yeah, case in point right here. Absolutely not enough. That went down in the blink of an eye. And the Ultras are doing a good job defending against some of the multitasking. We got some spellcasters available as well. Just a 1 Viper and 1 Infestor, but could be crucial. But oh, that's a lot of Archons now being added in, and that is what MaxPax is waiting for. Reynor realizing that he no longer has the chance to overwhelm a very light army, if you will. 3 more Mortals join in. 7 Archons join in. That's no longer an army in which an Ultra can easily surround and hope to win. And so Reynor evacuates into the Brute Lord transition, and Brute Lords would be a lot better against this. Now, we still have 16 Stalkers with +3, but can they take down the Brood Lords fast enough is always the question. Fungal just to buy some time. Brood Lords trying to use the dead space on this map, which they do so very effectively. And that will push MaxPax back. MaxPax lost 18 probes, by the way, to that Ling run-by. Took a long time to clean up, and it was only a few Lings, too. Now there's a lot more Lings heading into that 4th base, but there's quite a bit more defense. as well as a very appropriately timed warp in, so that's not going to be super effective. But Reynor's on 4,000 minerals, 1,500 gas. He's got Broodlords now in a count of 7, which is good, not perfect. It's a little scary, especially if they're caught alone. But he is moving on to a better composition where MaxPax is going to be locked in on a ground army. He really can't afford a transition over into Stargates, not unless he gets a 5th base up. He needs a 5th base, and he needs to make sure to take really cost-efficient engagements and not lose any more economy to these run-bys. 9 more probes do go down. Down to 40 probes, by the way, guys. MaxPax, obviously just thinking he's all in at this point, is going to use the army he has built to the best of its potential and hope that it wins the game. Very reminiscent of Showtime versus Reynor Game 1 and a much different composition. This is a wall of Protoss that those Ultras are not going to get past. They absolutely need the Broodlords, and the Broodlords will be the hard stop for MaxPax's army. As tempting as it might be to blink underneath these Broodlords, you gotta remember that there's gonna be a fungal, there might be a blinding cloud as well, and the actual Ultras will then finally be able to nibble on the vulnerable Stalkers. Certainly more vulnerable than the immortal Archons that would love to accompany them. Warp Prism gonna go into the main base. There's only so much that MaxPax can afford in terms of harassment, though, but, you know, even though Reynor has a big bank still, well, comparatively anyways, he has lost all of his actual mining bases. I mean, you really gotta start to actually look at the minimap. The minimap is a far cry away from what it was 6 minutes ago, where Reynor was starting to take over the map with creep spreads, starting to take over the map with bases, and it was more about MaxPax's lack of fit that was the conversation. Well, now, Reynor also, without a 4th, much less a 5th, he's trying to double expand as I'm talking, is also in a position where he doesn't feel comfortable being aggressive, that's for sure. His army might be better in a perfect circumstance, but to get out on the map, potentially get thrown into a base trade, or potentially get his army out of position, right? Like, that would go very, very poorly for him because he can't remax. A Zerg player would probably very rarely feel comfortable all-inning, if you will, without that comfortable 6,000 bank, right? These Ultras might take a surprisingly good engagement. It was just the numbers and the ability to get this around that really made the difference there. MaxPax took the engagement because he had a very anti-Ultra army. I don't think you can doubt that. He even had a couple of hallucinations in there, which is a really cool thing. But they didn't quite create the wall that he was hoping for. And the Ultras do win out. Now, still a trade, but Reynor is the one with the bank. He had the safety bank. So again, while being aggressive might have been a little too far of a reach for Reynor, who did just get slapped back down to his original 3 bases. Almost find out, right? Defensively, he still has a real shot. But MaxPax has made a crucial transition. He's taken all of the resources he can muster, not to rebuild the army he just traded, but to rather build into Tempests. It's going to be kind of a surprising maneuver. Reynor probably not going to expect it. I mean, I've been saying on 4 bases you can't really afford this transition, but it's kind of a gamble at this point. You know, theoretically you can't afford the transition safely while also still remaining on a good ground army is what I'm saying when I say you can't afford it. But if you kind of gamble here, I mean, gamble's maybe not the right word, but if you if you take the chance to afford the Stargates, the Tempest, and the Mothership, and maybe at the same time the Zerg player doesn't feel very comfortable moving into you, then yeah, I guess you can try and get a maxed out late game Protoss army off of your original 4 bases at 19 minutes. I don't think this happens often. There's far too many trades that are happening in which the Protoss has to remax on a ground army. There's far too many probes falling and Nexus under attack and static defense that have to be rebuilt. But MaxPax is able to be on the map aggressively in his opponent's face, killing hatcheries long enough and efficiently enough that he was able to afford a stable ground army. Not maxed out, but it is a stable supply, and get into Tempest. And only then does he actually add on this 5th base. It'd be very, very, very different if Reynor had not lost his 4th and his 5th. Because I think with 5 bases still mining, he might have felt more confident about taking some of the more offensive engagements or building more lings for run-bys or whatever you you want to say, but thrown back down to literally his original 3 bases. That's quite the all-in situation if you just throw your army across the map. But now having a 4th and 5th back up and running and finally working once again on his 6th, he will be back up to where he was before MaxPax had engaged on his side of the map. Which is good, but not great. It's not the perfect position. He would really love to continue expanding beyond that. Not just 6 bases to replenish where he was, but getting up to 7 and 8 bases. Especially if MaxPax does successfully defend this 5th, which is a ever so crucial gold base. A sign of the Tempest, and a good count too. 6 is probably quite disappointing to Reynor, who's hoping to use those Broodlords as a gotcha card a little bit longer. Ultras this time around not so efficiently engaging on the Protoss army. The numbers weren't there, the surround wasn't there, and the Ultras were individually focused and torn down, meaning that Reynor is now just all in on the front line to the right side. Neuroparasites coming through to try and help out. Infestors do eventually get popped, and the Ultras just cannot find, for the life of them, a good opportunity to take this engagement. It was all down really to the Broodlords, and they were getting some nibbles. The Broodlings were free firing on a lot of those Archons, but the Broodlords won't do the job by themselves. More reinforcements are on the way. 7 Ultras are on the way, as Reynor did have that bank, and now feels like he can actually maybe replenish a little bit more thanks to his 6-base economy. But I'm not sure he can replenish all that much. That was a lot of ults to throw away into an unideal engagement, and the Tempest is still a problem. 10 Corruptors do also get remade, but is that going to be enough, especially if they come out one at a time, and Stalker's there to help out as well? The answer is no. Reynor actually going to evacuate completely, say, okay, let's rebuild, let's wait here, let's wait for Spellcasters, Ultras, and everything combined together, and then maybe I can go again. And we are back to the classic PvZ scenario of the Zerg player being able to remax and the Protoss player not able to do so, is just looking for the best cost-efficient engagement. Did he get it? Or was that still too much damage to take despite the mass amount of Ultras lost? They have been rebuilt. I can't say the same for MaxPax's Archon count, currently non-existent. 3 Immortals in a good position, but currently firing on Lings most likely. And the Tempest will not hold against the Corruptors, not without the support. Lings going down, or probes going down, and the army going down means that Reynor will win game number 1. In a typical Zerg fashion, it just stalled out for a significant time as Reynor chose the path of recovery. Had to rebuild his 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th before really feeling like he could do the Zerg thing. Oop. And after a long game 1, we do have game 2 on site. Delta, top left MaxPax, bottom right Reynor. No one was responding to that guy. Who I'm not even sure is actually a caster, but, you know, whatever. So yeah, very interesting first game. I think we saw a lot of mastery of PvZ in the first 8 minutes, just the constant attempts from both players to do a lot of things. Harass, get map control, get run-bys, get a good army fight, whatever. Denied. Like, there wasn't a lot that necessarily happened. There wasn't big, shrieking moments in which you're like, oh my god. But I think if you were to look at it, like, intellectually, I actually think it was quite an impressive PvZ. You could tell that both players knew what they were kind of supposed to do and had to do and would want to do, but then the other player was just as mindful of that, and of course the first player was just as mindful of that mindfulness. So you had a StarCraft 2 game that might have, I guess, been a little boring if you were just looking for a lot of action for the first 10 minutes, but I think was actually quite a smart PvZ. And then late game. Late game hit. MaxPax took the economic damage that forced him to all in. I mean, he went down to 40 probes. He did not intend, by the looks of things, to get a 5th base again. But after he killed the gold base, the 6th, the 5th base that was right behind it, and then maneuvered over to kill 4th base, I think he realized, possibly as late as I did, but like, wait a second. Okay, you might have never gotten a 5th base, but this Zerg player is not exactly rich. Unfortunately, as is so often the case, and what makes a lot of people frustrated, I think, facing Zerg, is that you're never quite sure what they already had. So, you know that killing all their bases and sending them back down to a, 40 drone economy, if that, is a good thing. That's undeniable. It's always a good thing. But you don't know how quickly they can recover from that. You don't know how much bank they have to make that kind of a moment. So if they had 0 bank, well then Reynor might have been screwed. But if they had 3,000 bank, 3,000, 1,500 approximately, well then he can double expand, he can triple expand, he can change out its composition, throw away some lings over there, make more broodlords here. And it still kind of put Reynor in the winning position, even though the economies had really been reduced to probably even roughly even, actually. I didn't look at the graph, but it wouldn't have surprised me. MaxPax barely on a 4th as his own resources running out. Reynor just on his original 3. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chaz, for that donation. $10. Did you bring in the heat? Sure. Thank you. We got a Voider coming out first, which is always worthwhile to talk about, but it basically is just an Overlord killer. I mean, it's like, oh, it's not a Phoenix, it's not an Oracle. Holy shit. Not an Oracle, oh my god. Well, it's an Overlord killer. But sometimes, because there's an Overlord killer, it can lead to sneakier things behind it. Also, it's a little more helpful if you are being roach attacked. But we don't have roaches on the way. We actually have a very fast Hydralist Den. And, ooh, Reynor with a 2-base Hydra build. His 3rd hatchery not yet done. Up against someone who went Oracle Void Ray. Oracle gets pushed away pretty quickly. Sees that it is it's already a lair.
You must construct additional pylons.
His Void Ray saw that the 3rd base is only still building. The Hydralist Den itself is missed. You also see that all 4 gas is taken very quick. I mean, I think there's only really one thing it can be. And if I don't see this build too often, and I definitely don't do the build because, fuck playing Zerg, but this might be very difficult for MaxPax to hold. Now he's getting into Blink. And Blink Stalkers are, versatile. They can, depending on the situation, take on Hydras. In fact, sometimes they can win against Hydras. Hydras, although very powerful, are also kind of glass cannon-y, right? So, actually, especially with shield batteries, the Stalkers will out-sustain. It'll be a bit of a longer battle, but it'd be one where the Stalkers have the regen option. I'm actually thinking that Reynor is not so much believing in his Hydra. But, well, if that was ever actually his plan, I mean... Hey, the infestation fate is on the way. Alright, the Hydras, I mean, literally are moving out. And then went, you know what, never mind. And I think that's... Oh my god, what is this, actually? A 6-minute hive. It's like a 550 hive, even, actually. Okay. This is very interesting. So I know that a Hydra attack, if it's not sniffed out, can be very difficult to hold, because you just don't have a lot of units. No one has a lot of units, but the Hydras, if they get a big swell of lings to reinforce, especially if the lings get a surround, they can take down Stalkers, obviously. But even if the lings don't get a surround, they're still great fodder for the Hydras, and it'd be a little testy. But Reynor, he kind of threatens it. Doesn't even look all that scary to the Protoss. The Protoss is like, yeah, I think this is plenty, which it was. And then Reynor goes into a hive and a lurker den. The MaxPax is certainly picking up on that. Prepared for the attack, as one should, and then realize the attack isn't really happening, and is now just going to try and pull the Hydra numbers here. Yep, so far so good. Didn't lose the Stalkers there. Hatcheries take a lot of damage. That actually might be snipeable for the Stalkers, who are heading that direction. War Prism in tow. More stalkers being produced off of the 6 gateways that MaxPax has. Not too bad. He is also adding on Colossus as well, so not purely dependent on the gateways. Also readying a 4th base. There it is, actually, as the Lings are forced to come home. They actually need to help out right here. The surround would be fantastic, but will it be enough, or are there too few Lings? Blink had just been used. That opportunity is absolutely there. Hydra's just shredding through the Stalkers, and that was pretty much ideal. Because especially if this then leads into a push from Reynor, that 4th base might still be gone, but Reynor, I think with loftier ambitions, he is looking towards lurkers. So while an immediate attack, a counter-attack after finding the successful surround on the Stalkers would have been enticing, just going into lurkers at 8 minutes, and they already have their lurker range, it's also pretty freaking good. And there's not a super strong response from MaxPax against that. There's no disruptors to two-shot the lurkers. There's no charge lots to help kind of like a pseudo-surround, or at least tank initially, right? There's no immortals to burst through them and hopefully survive with their shield. I mean, the army that MaxPax has only has its mobility to work off of. And even that, not for very long. The burrow speed is almost done, which means the lurkers, which are already kind of more mobile, I mean, they're more mobile than a tank, for instance, are going to be fairly mobile. They're pretty good. So MaxPax, I think he has to keep the illusion of being the aggressor, of taking the map control, but I don't think he can actually take engagements. Now, Reynor kind of can't do the same either. Like, he can certainly defend lurkers, defending lurkers, but attacking, if he's ever found with his lurkers unburrowed, can, you know, maybe make a mistake, especially if they get totally surrounded. But as I say that, we do have almost all the lurkers right into the choke at the 4th base, which is just ideal for a Zerg. The other lurkers came alongside to the 3rd base, which a little less ideal of a position, but still pretty freaking good. And you can see that MaxPax just has no answer. There's just nothing this army can do against this composition unless it found the absolutely perfect engagement. And it totally did not. This is, I think, a very difficult game for the Protoss to dissect, honestly. GG's. Reynor with a 2-0 moves on to the finals.